Abortion is a very hot topic, but how did it get that way? Are people's qualms with it rooted in history, or are they issues of the modern age? To answer that, we'll have to go back to the beginning, the very beginning. The year is 1550 BCE. You are a pregnant Egyptian, but you really don't want this baby. Well, you're in luck, because the Ebers Papyrus just dropped, and with it, the first ever recorded instructions for induced abortion. All you had to do was get a plant fiber tampon coated in honey and crushed dates and, shove it up there. Fast forward to ancient Greece and abortion is booming. The great minds of the day consider it a fantastic way to control population growth and remove unwanted pregnancies. Even Aristotle said it was a good idea. As we continue through history, abortion continues to be pretty popular, but we're about to hit the first speed bump, the Bible. Just kidding. The Bible doesn't actually say much about abortion, believe it or not. This line is the closest you're gonna get, and many would argue this is just proof of God's omniscience and that it doesn't actually say shit about abortion. We do have some other mentions of abortion in religious texts like the Didache and the Talmud, but they're a little more cut and dry. Or are they? The Didache says, quote, "You shall not murder a child by abortion, nor kill that which is begotten," which seems pretty simple on the surface, but consider the definition of the word abortion. Back in the day, there was this thing called the quickening. It was basically the point at which a mother could feel a baby moving in her womb. After the quickening, terminating a pregnancy was definitely an abortion, but beforehand, it may not have been considered one. The other text I just mentioned, the Talmud, is extremely clear on that. Other Jewish writings explicitly state that fetuses are subhuman, saying it's actually totally cool to get rid of one as long as it hasn't started coming out yet. Let's continue down the timeline. In medieval Europe, abortion pretty much held to this quickening standard. It was maybe not so chill to have an abortion post-quickening, but it was also up to the mother to decide when the quickening had occurred. Early American law mimicked this since it was based on English common law, and it wasn't until the late 1800s that things began to change. A series of sensational news stories about young girls dying from abortion swept the nation, and with them, new laws restricting abortion access. But nowhere in those laws did they say anything about protecting fetal life. We'll get to that particular argument later. These laws were about protecting women from predators, since most of these news stories revolved around older men like pastors or officials who assaulted young girls or women and then forced them to get abortions to cover it up. Unfortunately for these creeps, the unsafe abortion medicines of the past killed or seriously injured these girls, which is what caught the attention of the state legislature and law enforcement. But now we come to the biggest single influence on the abortion debate in history, the man who started the entire pro-life movement, Dr. Horatio Storer. This guy was pretty influential. He went to Harvard, was one of the first people to perform a C-section, and also basically invented gynecology. He also hated abortion. Apparently he got that one from his dad, who was a professor of midwifery at Harvard. No one really knows why his dad hated it so much, but maybe he just really liked babies. In any case, Storer hated abortion, and he was going to do something about it. His first step was joining the American Medical Association, or AMA. It was a relatively new group made to standardize medical recommendations to doctors around the country, but Storer used it to send a letter he ghost wrote to every state governor urging them to pass legislation against abortion. He also proposed an essay contest for an anti-abortion pamphlet which would be passed out to women all around the country. He entered it himself under an alias and won, and his resulting essay is truly one of the essays of all time. Titled, "Why Not? A Book for Every Woman," this thing makes some wild claims. It says that abortion can cause cancer, insanity, epilepsy, sterility, and idiocy, just to name a few. It also says that the thought of abortion is so horrible that women may go insane or drop dead just thinking about it. It's unlikely that any of this was even true at the time, but it definitely isn't in the modern day, where medication abortions are actually safer than childbirth. Storer also makes the argument that abortions are bad for women because it's good for their health to keep having kids. He says that married people having sex without having kids is pretty much just legalized prostitution. And speaking of prostitution, he says that a man visiting a prostitute instead of banging his wife so that he can keep her from getting pregnant is better than a woman having an abortion. He literally says that having an abortion is as bad as strangling or drowning your children. This guy is pretty weird. But if you read deeper into his writings, you'll find his true motives. Storer was a Christian, but more specifically a Protestant, and as a good Protestant, he was worried about the amount of Catholic immigrants coming into the country. According to him, Catholics weren't having as many abortions, which meant their birth rate was higher than Protestant women, and he was very worried about this demographic shift. When talking about the new lands being settled to the west, he said, quote, "Shall they be filled by our own children or by those of aliens? This is a question that our own women must answer. Upon their loins depend the future destiny of the nation." What's really ironic about this is that Storer actually converted to Catholicism later in life, specifically because they were more against abortion. Storer's arguments were pretty persuasive for a lot of people, and many states began enacting more strict abortion laws. The old arguments against abortion were that it was dangerous for women or that it was a crime against the husband to rob him of a child, but this was the start of a new argument against abortion, the value of fetal life. In the next couple of decades, more people took up Storer's fight, but they were small disorganized groups, mainly Catholics. But in 1980, the Southern Baptist Church got new leadership, and for once, they agreed with the Catholics. With their support, larger organizations like the Right to Life were born. But Storer's influence had begun to fade by now, and public support for abortion was pretty high. With the the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling, abortion was federally protected in every state, which was a big no-no for these groups. They began a decades-long campaign against abortion, whittling down the protections for it until eventually overturning Roe v. Wade in 2022, which brought abortion to the forefront of American politics once again. But what about the rest of the world? Abortion is allowed in some form in most countries, and a majority of them have been expanding access throughout the past decades. Many former European colonies in Africa have been liberalizing their laws, which previously banned abortion as holdovers from British and Napoleonic penal codes. There are some countries which have total or near total bans on abortion, such as Honduras, Nicaragua, Madagascar, and the Philippines, and in some states, the US of A. In general, more people think abortion should be legal than illegal, so it's likely that the laws will continue to be liberalized. It does vary drastically by country though, with places like Sweden and France having an overwhelming majority in support of abortion, while Indonesia has an overwhelming opposition. In any case, abortion is a hot topic and seems like it will continue to be for the foreseeable future, but hopefully you now have a bit more insight into its history and can better formulate your opinion on it. If you're interested in taking a deeper dive, I'll leave a link to all my sources in the description. I'll catch you in the next one.